Hello and welcome to the GTLA Lakers 818 podcast. It's Tuesday, January 15th. We just finished watching the Lakers play the Bulls, and we got the win. We're now in 8th place after falling to 9th place for one day. Got my guest host here again, Chris. How's it going, bro?
Not bad, man. Glad to be back.
Yeah, so this Laker game today was, we're playing the Bulls after losing to the Cavs. Two crappy teams. And it was an ugly game, but we got the win. I thought the first half was really boring. Nothing was exciting to me. I was falling asleep. And then in the second half, what I thought was the catalyst to our win was Lonzo launching 3 threes in a row, and that seemed to spark an energy in us, and the Bulls just didn't have anything to match. And then I think the second little catalyst was Steve Mikhailik's 2 threes back to back. I thought that kind of just sealed the deal. Although we had that crazy ending, which we'll talk about. But what did you see tonight?
Yeah, Lonzo looking a lot better in terms of the scoring impact he had. I think he started with 6, 13 in that third quarter, get him to 19 on the game. And I saw more or less what I'm expecting to see from him. His main weapon is going to be the crossover with that step back 3. Did see some situations where he got himself into trouble once he got into that mid-range area, looking to pass where defenders were definitely playing him for the pass, and it was a little uneven there. But for the most part, when he's hitting his shot and doing all the other things that we know that he can contribute to the game, his rebounding, his playmaking, and his defense individually, that's a player who can help you win some games, and that's what he did tonight.
And the only exciting thing about the game was the ending. We were up 10 with 50 seconds left, and then all of a sudden it turned into some turnover fest, and it seemed like the Bulls were trying to make a little comeback. It was just funny after it felt like a good win until the last 45 seconds of that game, and you're just wow, just these young Lakers.
Yeah, doing it again. We've seen it time and time again. A lot of games that look like they are over and done with, maybe in the refrigerator, as the late Chick Hearn would say, and Lakers tend to be leaving the door open. Again, you saw it. I think they led by as many as 18 late in the fourth quarter, and just some sloppy play allowed the Bulls to get back in it. And I don't know, I guess maybe they heard about the Jack in the Box promotion with the tacos, disappointing the fans there, just getting to 100 and making sure the Staples Center crowd goes away not fed. But got the win, and it was important to be able to pick that up after how they've been playing lately. And it's a good thing from the standpoint that they got the win, and I think Coach Walton also has a lot of teachable moments he can point to in the film room as they get ready to go out on this road trip.
Yeah, well, the last time we did a podcast was about 5 games ago. Last time we talked, the Lakers were in 8th place as well, and at 20-18. Since then, we went 3-3, so 500. I guess that's not terrible for this Laker team in a 6-game stretch. And our record is now 24-21 in 8th place. Strange point of the season, just because we've seen ourselves go from 4th place to actually 9th place. We actually, all day today until this win, we're outside of the playoffs, and that's a bit of a strange feeling. And you're starting to wonder what's going to happen with this Lakers team this year.
Yeah, it just speaks to how cutthroat this Western Conference has been.
That too.
San Antonio making a play to move up. Houston, I think they're all the way up to 4th place. Remember the first week of the season, first couple weeks, really first month, they struggled. Utah, Lakers played them Friday, took that loss. That's another team that's like last year, coming on stronger in the second half. So I mean, it's going to come down, to the last, I'd say, week or so, but really the last few games of the season, depending on what sort of injuries some of these other teams have, how much longer LeBron's out for the Lakers. I mean, that the margin this year is just razor thin, and there are going to be a handful of teams on the outside looking in that, really have the personnel and I think play well enough to deserve to be a playoff team, but it's just that with the imbalance in the talent between the conferences right now, there are going to be some deserving ones on the outside looking in, and hoping it's not the Lakers.
Yeah. All right. Well, in today's podcast, what I want to do is go through, the Lakers' last 5 games or so. A lot of things to talk about in there. We're definitely talking about Lakers free throws, LeBron, how long he's going to be out for, and just looking ahead to the Lakers' next few games. So the first game since the last podcast was the Minnesota game, and this was a bad game. Kuzma didn't play, and we were down 16 at the end of the first quarter and lost the game by 22 points. One thing that I thought was strange right from the bat was we started Zubac and McGee together in the starting lineup in this game with Kuz out. And to nobody's surprise, we went down 15-1 before we had to call a timeout and sub Zubac out. Like, what? I thought that was a terrible decision by Luke. Like, what do you think? Starting Zubac and McGee together?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I can point to, and for the most part, I tend to be more of a defender of Luke Walton, but there's some things that he does with the lineup that are very questionable. And having 2 centers on this particular team that, are really traditional 5s. They're not guys who have great mobility. They're not guys who really you want anywhere near the perimeter, and forcing them to, have to cover guys like Karl Anthony Towns, Taj Gibson, Andrew Wiggins, that Minnesota front court, all 3 of them who can shoot the 3. That just, it's a head-scratching decision. And the real liability that, as I've said in the past with Zubac, he creates is on the defensive end, and asking him to be out there in that lineup, it just, I don't get it.
Yeah, well, let's stick to this Luke Walton starting lineup theme. One thing that happened tonight against the Bulls was Luke Walton did change the starting lineup because of our terrible game against the Nets, and so we started KCP in for Hart and Tyson Chandler in for McGee. What did you think of that decision by Luke Walton?
I think more or less you're looking at 2 players who are pretty similar. I think you talk about the switch for KCP instead of Hart. That's somebody who I think gives you more shooting, like I talked about on the last podcast. KCP, I think, probably the best shooter on this team, and probably the one player who's got the most consistent role coming off of screens as a catch-and-shoot guy. He's going to be running the same plays no matter what the personnel is. And with Chandler, again, a guy who's pretty interchangeable with McGee as far as being that rim-protecting center. You're not running really any plays through him on the offensive end. He's there as a screen setter, and then on the defensive end as a rebounder and shot blocker. So I guess you could argue it worked out tonight. We'll see going forward if that's something that's just a one-time deal or Luke sticks with it going forward.
Would you stick with that lineup next game?
I think if you're looking at trying to get some early offense, then I think having KCP out there as somebody who I think is similar to Hart, but I think, like I said, I think a little bit better as a shooter right now, and maybe more of a consistent presence in terms of what his role is. I think you can go ahead and roll with that. I don't know that it's going to make a, overwhelming difference, but maybe it's something on the margins that they feel like if they want to get out to faster starts, because that's been a big problem early on in the games. If KCP can hit a few shots early, then maybe they're not falling into these big deficits, and that's going to be a point that they want to avoid going on the road. They can't really afford to fall into a double-digit hole in Oklahoma or Houston early and expect that they're going to be able to claw their way out of that one.
All right, well, bringing it back to that Minnesota game, this game was so bad for us that Lance Stevenson had the game high, which was 14 points, and game high 6 assists. Lonzo, 0 for 4, 0 points. Ingram, 13 points on 5 of 16 shooting. Josh Hart, 10 points, 3 of 12 shooting. And Michael Beasley had 11 points and 5 rebounds. And we'll talk about him at the end because his numbers are pretty crazy, actually, this last few games. But yeah, ugly win for the Lakers. And then this was a game, after this, Luke Walton kind of called out the Lakers, Lonzo and Ingram somewhat, saying there was no passion. And that's something that I want to talk about here. It's so apparent to me. When I watch the games, I always look for the energy. And I mean, that's why even last year on the podcast, I always talk about Ingram and how he's some games he's up, some games he's down. And, Stu Lance and James Worthy both talk about the Lakers' lack of energy. What do you think it is? Why does our team just not play with this fire? These guys seem like they're there's not that much competitiveness or something. It's strange to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. I think particularly on the defensive end, they're really not engaged, giving up too many easy points, too many layups, open threes, and it's, I guess, kind of a thing where your offense can flow into your defense, where if you're hitting shots and you're feeling good about yourself, you pick up and have a little more energy on the defensive end. And during this stretch without LeBron, that's been part of the problem. They get out to very slow starts where 4, 5, 6 minutes in the game and they're still sitting on single digits or they're barely above that. And I think maybe early on when they see some of their shots aren't falling, it carries on to the other end of the floor. And, that's a possible theory for why they're getting off to these slow starts and then getting themselves in the holes that they really have struggled to dig themselves out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my perspective is kind of, I've put a lot of it on both Lonzo and Ingram myself. I feel like they should be the leaders. If Rondo and LeBron aren't, playing, then those guys should be, I feel like, our leaders. Ingram, because he's the oldest, he's been in the league the longest of our young guys. And Lonzo, because he's our point guard, simply. And they're the ones who, to me, seem like they're half asleep a lot of the times. You'll see them in spurts, do what they do, but overall, they, even tonight, for example, against the Bulls, where was Lonzo in the first half? Just not there, but then all of a sudden in the third quarter, it's all right, now, I'm here, I'm all right, I'm playing, and I'm hooping, and yeah, I don't know, I feel like they need to, if I always feel like Kuzma plays with energy. He's out of control a lot of times, but he plays with some heart. But I don't know, Alonzo and Ingram specifically, I feel like need to wake up.
Yeah, and I think maybe it goes back to the fact that Kuzma is a little more experienced and a little older in terms of the seasoning he's had, spent more time in college at Utah than both Lonzo and Ingram did. They're both one and dones, and I feel like they're still at the point where they're both under age 22, right? Maybe both 21 and under. So yeah, I think just an issue where their game is very predicated off of their confidence in how things are going in terms of how their shots falling, whether they're they're getting rebounds, whether they're making plays, but I think a lot of it goes back to their shooting and how they execute on the offensive end of the floor. And if they're not doing that well, they see themselves miss a couple shots, then it hurts their confidence. And you can just kind of tell from the eye test that when they're not engaged and they're not focused on what they're doing, they struggle to really put out a quality effort.
Yeah, all right, well, let's move on to the next game. And this next game was against Dallas, and I call this game like a response game. And I'm actually starting to get sick and tired of these response games. Like, even this win tonight, I would call a response game, because we had a terrible loss to the Nets last game, and then all of a sudden, like, it's a big deal in the media. Luke Walton said he's making a lineup change, and it's like, Lakers better win or else it's the end of the season and everyone's gone, and then they win the game, and then it's like, but, and again, with this game, this Dallas game, like I said, we got killed by Minnesota, and then against Dallas, we do a comeback win. So we were down 13 at halftime, and by the way, Kuzma was back for this game, which I thought was huge just for team morale, because he's been our best player, like, over the last, since, sans LeBron and Rondo, and he didn't play that well. Like, he had 13 points on 4 of 20 shooting, but I just thought him being back was big for the team. And we had an explosive third quarter in this game. And again, it was like Lonzo again. Like, this was something about him in third quarters. Like, he's fine, like chilling out in the first half, and then like Lonzo like kind of led this rally, I remember. And we scored 32 points in the third quarter and held Dallas to 13 points. And got the W. Ingram had 29 points, 6 assists. Zoe, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 threes. Josh Hart, 14 points, 12 rebounds, 6 steals. No, he had 14 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 steals. And Beasley at 13 points in 9 minutes. It was a good win against Dallas.
I feel like continues a trend. They, for whatever reason, seem to be better on the second night of back-to-backs, which is kind of counterintuitive. But I guess when you have nights like they did in Minnesota and Walton's clearing out the line early, going to the bench, then they're not really playing the full game, and they feel like they have a sense of urgency to respond in that next game. So again, maybe chalk that up to having some younger players being forced to step into larger roles at this point with Ball and Ingram. And I definitely think Kuz coming back, the aggression he showed, even though he missed 16 shots, the fact is the defenses tend to respect him in a way that they maybe don't with Lonzo and Ingram. And I think just even if you're not necessarily hitting your shots, Kuzma, he's continuing to be aggressive and just playing with a sort of pace and energy that you want to see carry through the rest of the team. And I think that's what happened in the Dallas game.
Yeah, and kind of just wanted to talk about real quick, Luka Doncic. He had 27 points against the Lakers. What do you think of him?
Looks just a very poised and composed player. Played professionally in Europe like pretty much every prospect there does, from his early teens. And I think that, he's as advertised in terms of the hype that he had going into last year. He was, I think, for most of last season, the consensus number 1 pick, and it looked as if it was a case where a lot of scouts kind of fell into that old stereotype of the European players being slower, maybe not being physically capable enough of competing in this league. But I mean, he absolutely does that. I don't think there's been any question of that so far. Probably in the lead for Rookie of the Year. And, in addition to being able to hold his own physically. He does all the other things that you tend to see from European players in terms of having a lot of polish with their shot and their playmaking ability.
Yeah, all right, well, let's move on to talking about LeBron James. So today at practice, he was seen getting some shots up. I posted some videos of it on my Instagram. If you're not following, follow on Instagram at LakerMemes818. So it's good to see him getting some shots up. He's going to get reevaluated tomorrow, and we're going to get some report about the next stage of his recovery. Hopefully some good news. What are we hoping we hear tomorrow with this?
I mean, at this point, I think Christmas we're talking about 3 weeks back now. So I'd have to imagine that he's still at bare minimum a week away from playing in a game. I'd imagine he'd have to get some practice time and some just conditioning when you're not playing for 3 weeks and you have a lower body injury like that. That's something that's going to prevent you from being able to be in basketball shape. And even as meticulous as LeBron is about taking care of his body, having a groin injury like that, that's something that we heard at the time he's going to have to make sure he's cautious with, make sure that he's checking all the boxes in terms of ramping up his activity. The last thing you want to see is any sort of setback. So hopefully tomorrow you were hearing news about him being able to just ramp up the progression in his workload and get closer to practicing and scrimmaging, and hopefully that means he's closer to being able to play again.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting looking back because when the injury happened, we saw LeBron word out, "I felt a pop," which is the last thing you'd want to hear him say. It might be a little telling. And then he tweeted, "Dodge the bullet, blah, blah, blah." So you kind of felt at first like, okay, yeah, he might be out 3 to 5 games. It's been, I think, at least 11 games. I don't know if tonight was either the 11th or 12th game he's been out.
Yeah, I think it was 11 tonight.
And they also said this is the longest LeBron has ever been out in his career, which is pretty crazy. Yes. And yeah, the groin injury is just tough. I mean, that's just an area that you're using it at all times you're playing basketball. And it makes sense that it's something you just cannot rush back from. Even if you feel like you feel painless, like I'd imagine you just have to take extra precaution because it's something like a hamstring maybe where it's just easy to pull again or re-aggravate. And so, but yeah, there was some rumors circulating. I don't know if you heard this, that his injury is actually pretty severe enough that he might be out till late February. I saw some reports. If that were to be the case, then what do you think about the outlook for the Lakers and just things moving forward?
Yeah, you really gotta hope that it's not that long, because unless there's a significant change in the roster makeup, they're not a playoff team if he has to miss another month, is what we're talking about. If it's, we're in mid-January now, so we're talking at least till February 15th.
Yeah.
That gets us to late February and past the All-Star break. So, yeah, I'm hoping he can be able to play some games towards the end of January going into February. But, at the same time, you got to consider the long-term prospects of the team, understanding that with the roster they had, this was not a year that they were going to be able to necessarily win a championship. I think anything that they did beyond getting to the playoffs and winning a series was gravy. So we'll see how much longer it is that he's out. But if the calendar turns from January to February and he's got to be on the sidelines for any significant period of time, that's that's when the season starts getting in jeopardy.
Now, is there any concern that LeBron, just at this point in his career, 16 seasons in, 8 straight trips to the finals, played all 82 games last year, that maybe he's the man who was once a robot who could never get hurt, that he's entering some later stage of his career where, I mean, dare I say, he can get hurt or something?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the concern that I think anybody who follows enough NBA basketball had going into the season and had when he signed his contract. You know, it's fortunately a groin injury is not something catastrophic like a tear in his knee or any sort of broken bone. So from that standpoint, you feel fortunate. But again, you have to understand he is in year 16. He has played an unprecedented amount of minutes when you add up both his regular and postseason play. And it's possible that those factors compound what would otherwise be maybe just a normal injury and make it a little more severe. So, yeah, something to keep in mind. And again, you hope that he gets well soon.
Now, with the Lakers struggling the way they have and just the way they look, and I mean, just for example, even though the Lakers won tonight, the game was ugly. Like, they did not look that good. I just thought the Bulls just really sucked. And they sucked. I mean, I feel like I know most NBA players, but that team had players, like multiple players I just never even heard of or didn't even know they're on that team. Like, but I wanted to ask you, how good then is this making LeBron look? Like, with him being out, and we were in 4th place, and we were looking good. I mean, remember the train was moving nicely, where everyone in Lakerland was happy. How good is this making him look? The fact that he leaves and then like the team just looks like what it is now.
I think he more or less got what was advertised. The undisputed first ballot Hall of Famer, somebody who can fill up the box score in virtually every statistical category. When you take somebody like that off your team, it doesn't matter what team he's on, you're going to see a setback and the drop off in the level of play. Given the fact that this is a younger team and the structure and composition, losing him as well as losing Rajon Rondo, I think that's another significant injury.
Yeah.
You saw how well they played towards the end of the Christmas Day game against the Warriors when he was out there. Losing 2 players who are proven veterans and proven producers in this league like that, I'm not shocked at where they fall in the standings. I just kind of hope that it wouldn't be this severe. But I don't think anybody looked at the situation with the injuries they had and said, yeah, this team is going to be improving their win percentage. That just is totally out of the question.
Right. But maybe just more so like everyone, now that everyone's kind of seeing what the team is without him, that the fact that he's carrying this bunch to the heights that we were at, like more from that perspective, like because I mean, I feel like everyone's view on our young guys like it's kind of just changed, or they've kind of been like exposed, quote unquote, now since LeBron's been out. Like you're like, oh damn, well how good is Ingram actually? How good is Lonzo actually? I mean, because this is a time when you expect these people to step up and like, and that's kind of how I was thinking about it. Like if these are who he's playing with and he's got them to the 4th seed and damn near on the 1st, like feels pretty good. But yeah, let's move on to the Pistons game. This was the Kyle Kuzma game. Kuzma, career high, 41 points in only 3 quarters. I wasn't exactly sure why he didn't play in the 4th. Was it his back or like... Because the game was pretty close still at the end of the 3rd.
I think it was relatively close into the 3rd, but in that 4th quarter, that bench unit managed to keep and I think maybe even extend that lead. Yeah, I see 23-24 was the fourth quarter points, Lakers +1. So, and I would have to imagine the game, it ended up being 113-100 was the final. It's only a 13-point win, but I remember them leading by closer to 20. Mm-hmm. So I think it was just a situation where Luke was getting ready to do the line change and put Kuzma back in with maybe about 7-8 minutes left in the game, and he didn't need to do it because they managed to just extend that lead.
Yeah, now let's go back to Kuzma. Kuzma, 22 points in the third quarter. He was hot. 5 of 10 from 3, 16 out of 24 shooting. This was a good night for him. And playing against his Detroit, his hometown team, Flint, Detroit. What did you see out there from Kuzma then?
I mean, he just looked like the most polished blue chip prospect that we have. He managed to get a lot of those points without having to exert a lot of usage in terms of his dribbles or time that he had to touch the ball. A lot of it was just, catch and shoots, cuts off of weak side action where he'd just make the right play and get to the spot on the floor that he needed to get the pass and attack immediately when he caught the ball. Some nice plays in transition, some leak outs where he finished fast breaks. I know one play he had where he did a nice job running the length of the court, catching a pass, gathering, and then excellent ball fake with the right hand. And once the defender flew by, it just laid it up off the backboard. And it was great to see him also on the defensive end. That's where I was most impressed with him. Forced Blake Griffin into really one of the worst games he's had as a professional. I think the first game he had in his career without a rebound.
Yeah, really strange.
That was something that I was a little concerned with going into the game, with him being the power forward and knowing he's given up at least 25, 30 pounds to a guy like Blake Griffin, who's even at this stage still a very polished scorer and somebody who understands how to take advantage of a mismatch like that, and Kuz just didn't let that happen. So great to see from him on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, sick game from Kuz. Michael Beasley had 19 points in 19 minutes. That dude's just a point per game scorer. Brandon Ingram, 10 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Lonzo, 5 points, 5 rebounds, 11 assists. KCP had 15 points. All right, let's move on. This is kind of something random that I want to talk about, and it's something that has to do with Lonzo and his layup form. I was watching this game the other day, and I always kind of noticed to myself, and even Stu Lance always says that Lonzo is a better finisher with his left hand than his right, and it's so true. He really does. His left hand layups not only go in more, but they also look better too. And I was always wondering why. And he went up for this layup the other day where it was so weird. I put it in slow-mo and he didn't extend his arm. He goes up for the layup, but he just stops his arm at a 90-degree angle, and then attempts a layup. As opposed to but anyone else, if you play basketball, if you're a hooper, if you're just gonna go for a wide open layup, you would just extend your arm and it would pretty much go straight. But I noticed and then I started thinking that's why I always say he short arms his shots. His floaters, they always look like they're from so low and stuff. Have you ever noticed anything like that?
Right. I want to say that maybe I was with you when we were watching that Knicks game and recognized it, because I think there was at least one layup attempt in that game where he's on the right side and he's trying to shoot it from the right side. And he's at the point where he's maybe just out of the range where he can extend it underhanded, and he needs to do an overhanded, traditional shot. And when he's on the right side of the basket, that's the issue. He has that same sort of shooting motion that you see from his regular jump shot from three. He's just kind of got that kind of short arm or shorthand little hitch on that right side when he's having to take any sort of overhanded shot from there. And as I was saying before, that was something that was a concern going into the season because he didn't have time to work on that over the summer with that knee injury. And he's going to need at least an off season or two to correct that issue. Right now, it's just something where they've got to find a way to hide that weakness, but it goes back to that playing the Knicks game where if he's on the wrong side of or that right side of the basket, which is the weak-handed side for him as a right-hand shooter, with that release he's got, he's got to find some other way to be effective as a shooter in that situation.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. All right, let's move on to this Utah game. This game was pretty boring. I mean, we got killed. We were down 21 at halftime. We lost the game by 18 points. There was a stretch in the second quarter where we didn't score a field goal for 7 minutes. And we ended the game shooting 36% from the field. Ingram, 15 points. Kuzma, 11 points. Pope, 12 points. Zubac had 10. And Michael Beasley had a team-high 17 points in 18 minutes. And now I'd like to talk about Mr. Michael Beasley. He's a point-per-game monster. We saw some graphic today in the game that said something like he was averaging 13 points in like 14 minutes over the last few games or something.
Yeah, I think it was 13.6 per 14.7 minutes, which is basically 14, almost a point per minute. Beasley, it's interesting. Obviously, he didn't have the chance to stay in the rotation earlier on in the season because of bereavement leave that I know he was on, but he's just looked like the professional scorer, and he's a veteran who's played both here with multiple teams and I think overseas in China he's had a stint. So this is somebody who I feel like knows how to find a way to fit in and get his opportunities when they're presented to him.
Yeah, that production is pretty crazy. Like, that dude is just a walking bucket for real. Like, he just a score. Tonight he sucked. I don't know what he was on tonight. He just had so many turnovers and didn't do anything. But dude can definitely score that ball. Score the ball.
Yeah, I mean, a point per minute. That's pretty tough to ask anybody to sustain that, particularly coming off of the bench for an extended period of time. But with LeBron being out, Rondo being out, the rotation having to get a little longer, it's good to see that they do have that source of instant offense off of the bench.
Yeah. All right, well, the last game was, we kind of talked about it, was that Cavs game that we played before this one tonight. Yeah, just a bad loss. Lost to the worst team in the league. Really not much to say. Just no fire. Stu Lance said it best, actually. At the end of the game, he said, this team has no fire and no sense of urgency. That sums it up. Yeah, there's not really nothing to talk about for that. I don't know.
Yeah, just beyond that, you hate to see them lose these games, because games like these against what, even with LeBron and Rondo being out, are equal or inferior competition, these are the ones that you're going to be looking back at the end of the season, and if they can't scratch 46, 47, get into close to 50 wins, which is what I feel like they would need to be safely into the playoff picture, you're going to be going back and circling these going, man, this is where the postseason qualification was lost on games like this one against the Cavs, the Knicks, the ones against Orlando. Want to see them avoid getting these sort of bad losses going forward to teams that they should be beating on paper, and they don't really have the margin of error to be losing because of how difficult the competition is in their own conference.
Yeah, all right, well, we're about to wrap up this podcast in a sec. Well, last thing I want to talk about before we look at the schedule ahead is, and this happened maybe a few weeks ago, but Kobe and his wife announced that they are having another child, and it's another girl. Why can't Kobe have a boy? Why can't we get a mini male boy Mamba? What's going on? How many kids is Kobe gonna have to have to get a boy?
Keep shooting his shot. It's it's funny. He's always been a volume shooter in his career, so I don't know, man. He's got to go like the Phillip Rivers route and put out like a dozen before he gets there. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like his magic number might be at number 8. I don't know why. Maybe number 8.
You think it's 8?
Jersey number, maybe. But that's still a lot, dude. You gotta have 7 girls to have 1 boy. Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think between the NBA money, the producing money he's getting now as an animator, the body armor money,
all the
Nike deals,
money.
the investments, I think he's good for it.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's look at the Lakers' schedule coming up, and it's a rough one. It is a rough one to start. We play at OKC Thursday. We play at Houston Saturday. We play at home against Golden State Monday. That's just gnarly. Those 3 right there. OKC, Houston, Golden State. Then we play at home against Minnesota Thursday, and at home against Phoenix Sunday. How many of these games are we winning?
Assuming, the only 2 on paper I see, and yeah, we're assuming they definitely won't have Rondo. It's unlikely they'll have LeBron.
Yeah.
The home games against Phoenix and Minnesota are the only ones on paper that I feel like I really see them winning. If they manage to get any one of those first 3 at Oklahoma, at Houston, or home versus Golden State, that'll be a win. What I feel like might happen, though, is they'll find a way to win 1 or 2 of those first 3, and then
even two
mess it up against Minnesota or Phoenix. But I'm gonna say this one plays out more or less the way you'd be setting the lines on it as an odds maker in Vegas. I think they go 2 and 3. They take the Timberwolves and Suns games.
That Minnesota game is going to be tough. I mean, we're not all that good. Like Minnesota's
they look really
pretty
poor
well
against Minnesota in that last one, and I'm hoping that they have one of those sense of urgency moments where they realize they got embarrassed and they need to come back and avenge that loss. So yeah, I'll give them those 2 games. I'd hope. I mean, I just gotta hope that they get one of those first 3, because yeah, Oklahoma and Houston, they're no joke, particularly Houston in the way that Harden's been playing over the past 5 weeks now. I mean, guy's averaging close to 40.
Yeah, he's killing it. Yeah, all right, well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Laker Nation, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.